Bullies try to steal the new kid's lunch money. Big mistake. He was trained by special forces. Marcus Holloway had learned to make himself invisible long before he walked through the doors of Westfield High School. At 17, he possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that allowed him to blend into crowds effortlessly. Average height, lean build, sandy brown hair that never quite stayed in place, and clothes that screamed discount store rather than designer label. His backpack was worn at the edges. His sneakers had seen better days, and everything about him whispered easy target to anyone looking for one. What the students of Westfield didn't know was that Marcus had spent the last 3 years living on military bases across the world. His father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Holloway, had been deployed to some of the most dangerous regions on Earth, and Marcus had been right there with him. While other kids his age were playing video games and worrying about homework, Marcus had been learning hand-to-hand combat from Navy SEALs, tactical awareness from Green Berets, and discipline from Marines who treated him like one of their own. But that was his secret. A secret he'd promised his father he would keep buried unless his life was truly in danger. The first day at Westfield High had been a careful dance of avoidance and observation. Marcus had mapped out every hallway, every exit, every blind spot where trouble might find him. He'd identified the social hierarchies within minutes of entering the cafeteria, spotted the alpha predators who ruled through intimidation and fear. At the top of that particular food chain sat Jake Morrison, a senior with the kind of swagger that came from never having faced real consequences for his actions. Jake was everything Marcus wasn't. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of natural charisma that drew followers like moths to a flame. His posse included Tommy Brennan, a thick-necked football player who spoke in grunts and solved problems with his fists, and Derek Walsh, a wiry kid with mean eyes who seemed to take genuine pleasure in other people's pain. Together, they formed the kind of toxic triangle that made high school hell for anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. Marcus had successfully avoided them for exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, as he sat alone at a corner table in the cafeteria, picking at his generic brand sandwich and trying to finish his chemistry homework, Jake's shadow fell across his notebook. Marcus didn't look up immediately. He'd learned that direct eye contact was often interpreted as a challenge, and he wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. Well, what do we have here? Jake's voice carried the kind of false friendliness that made Marcus's muscles tense involuntarily. New kid, right? Marcus something. Holloway, Marcus replied quietly, still not looking up from his homework. Holloway, Jake repeated, testing. The name like it tasted sour in his mouth. Funny, I don't remember giving you permission to sit at my table. Marcus finally lifted his eyes, meeting Jake's gaze with studied neutrality. Didn't realize tables had assigned ownership. The comment drew snickers from nearby students, and Marcus immediately regretted it. Jake's expression darkened, his jaw tightening in a way that suggested Marcus had just made his first real enemy at Westfield High. Smart mouth, Tommy grunted, stepping closer. I hate smart mouths. Relax, Tommy, Jake said, raising a hand but never taking his eyes off Marcus. I'm sure our new friend here was just being friendly. Weren't you, Marcus? Marcus said nothing, which proved to be the wrong choice. See, that's rude, Derek chimed in, his voice high and grating. Jake asked you a question. In my book, that means you answer. The cafeteria had grown quieter, other students sensing the tension and either moving away or leaning in to watch the show. Marcus recognized the pattern. He'd seen it play out on bases around the world, the way crowds formed around conflict like vultures circling carrion. I wasn't trying to be rude, Marcus said finally, his voice carefully modulated to avoid either submission or challenge. I just want to eat my lunch and finish my homework. Your homework? Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's precious. Tell you what, Marcus Holloway, since you're new here, I'm going to help you understand how things work. He reached down and flipped Marcus's chemistry notebook closed, scattering papers across the table. This is my cafeteria. These are my tables. And if you want to sit here, you pay rent. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear exactly, but recognition. He'd seen this before in a dozen different forms across a dozen different countries. The strong preying on the weak, the powerful demanding tribute from those who couldn't fight back. Rent? Marcus asked, though he already knew where this was heading. $20 a week, Jake said, settling into the chair across from Marcus like he owned it. Think of it as protection money. Keeps you safe from any misunderstandings. Marcus looked around the cafeteria, noting the positions of teachers, exits, and potential weapons. Old habits died hard. And if I don't pay? Jake's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Then accidents happen. Books get lost. Lockers get broken into. Sometimes new kids even get hurt walking down the wrong hallway at the wrong time. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his pulse slow, his breathing deepen. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Violence is never the first option, son. But when it becomes necessary, you make sure it's the last option anyone else chooses. I don't have $20, Marcus said truthfully. Then you better find it, Tommy growled, leaning over Marcus's shoulder. Or we'll find other ways for you to pay. Derek giggled, a sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. I've got some ideas about that. Marcus gathered his papers slowly, methodically. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, waiting to see if he would submit or resist. Either choice would define his next 3 years at Westfield High. He chose submission, for now. I'll see what I can do, Marcus said, sliding his notebook into his backpack. That's what I like to hear, Jake said, standing and straightening his Letterman jacket. You've got until tomorrow, Marcus Holloway. Don't disappoint me. As the 3 boys walked away, Marcus heard the whispers start, the usual aftermath of public humiliation. He'd been marked now, identified as prey. The next few weeks would be a test of his resolve and his ability to remain invisible. He failed that test spectacularly. The harassment started small, a shoulder bump in the hallway that sent his books flying, a foot extended just far enough to trip him on the stairs. His locker combination mysteriously changed twice in 1 week, forcing him to carry all his books and suffer the stares of students who knew exactly what was happening but chose to look the other way. Marcus endured it all with the kind of stoic silence that military life had taught him. He helped other students pick up their dropped books, offered quiet assistance to anyone who needed it, and maintained his carefully constructed invisibility. But inside, he was cataloging every incident, every face, every moment of complicity from the adults who were supposed to protect him. Mrs. Henderson, his English teacher, noticed the bruise on his arm where Tommy had grabbed him a little too hard. "Everything all right, Marcus?" "Fine," Marcus replied, and she didn't push. She didn't want to know. Mr. Peterson, the gym teacher, saw Jake shove Marcus into the lockers after class. "Boys will be boys," he muttered, and walked away. He didn't want to get involved. Principal Williams walked past as Derek emptied Marcus's backpack in the main hallway, sending homework and textbooks cascading across the floor. The principal's eyes met Marcus's for one brief moment, then slid away. He didn't want the paperwork. 3 weeks into his time at Westfield High, Marcus understood that he was completely alone. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Marcus had developed a routine: arrive at school early, before the predators were awake, eat lunch in the library where Mrs. Kowalski, the librarian, maintained a strict no-talking policy that discouraged social interaction, leave immediately after the final bell before the after-school crowd could corner him. It was a good system. It might have worked indefinitely, but Jake Morrison was nothing if not persistent. Marcus was walking toward the main exit, head down, backpack slung over one shoulder, when he heard his name called from behind. He didn't turn around. He'd learned that responding to Jake's summons only made things worse. "Marcus Holloway." The voice was louder now, more insistent. "I'm talking to you." Marcus quickened his pace, but the exit was still 50 yards away. Too far. He could hear footsteps behind him, the sound of multiple people moving with purpose. Running away. "Marcus?" Derek's voice, high and mocking. "That's not very polite." Marcus reached the main doors and pushed through, emerging into the afternoon sunlight. The parking lot was full of students heading home, climbing into cars, boarding buses. Safety in numbers, he thought. They wouldn't try anything here. He was wrong. Jake's hand landed on his shoulder like a vice, spinning him around. Tommy and Derek flanked him immediately, cutting off any possibility of escape. Around them, students slowed their pace, sensing drama. "We need to talk," Jake said, his voice carrying the kind of false reasonableness that preceded violence. "I don't think we do," Marcus replied. But he didn't pull away from Jake's grip. "Not yet." "See, that's where you're wrong," Jake continued, his fingers digging into Marcus's shoulder. "You've been avoiding me for 3 weeks. That's rude. Worse than rude. It's disrespectful." "I've been going to class," Marcus said, "doing my homework, staying out of trouble." "But you haven't been paying your rent," Tommy pointed out, cracking his knuckles. "That's a problem." Marcus looked around the parking lot. A dozen students had stopped to watch, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. He recognized some faces from his classes, kids who'd been friendly enough when Jake wasn't around. Now they looked like Romans watching gladiators, hungry for blood that wasn't their own. "I told you I don't have money," Marcus said. "Then you need to find another way to pay," Jake replied. I've been thinking about it, and I've got some ideas. Derek giggled again. Marcus was starting to understand that the sound was a warning, like a rattlesnake's tail. Every day you're going to do our homework, Jake continued. Math, English, history, science, all of it. And you're going to make sure we get good grades. That's cheating, Marcus said. That's survival, Jake corrected. Unless you'd prefer the alternative. Which is? Jake's smile was predatory. Tommy here used to wrestle. He's been looking for someone to practice on, haven't you, Tommy? Tommy grunted agreement, flexing muscles that strained against his shirt. And Derek's got a real creative streak when it comes to making people uncomfortable, Jake added. Show him, Derek. Derek reached into his backpack and pulled out Marcus's chemistry notebook, the one that had gone missing from his locker 2 days ago. Amazing what you can learn about someone from their homework, Derek said, flipping through the pages. Like how you move around a lot. Military brat, right? Bet you don't have many friends. Bet you don't have anyone who'd miss you if you just disappeared for a while. The threat was clear. Marcus felt his heart rate spike, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was predatory behavior, the kind that escalated into real violence. So what's it going to be, Marcus? Jake asked. Homework duty, or do we find out how tough you really are? Marcus looked around the circle of faces, dozens of students, all watching, all waiting. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them moved to help. He thought about his father, probably halfway around the world, fighting real battles against real enemies. He thought about the men and women who'd trained him, who taught him that strength without honor was just another form of weakness. And he thought about the 3 boys standing in front of him, drunk on their own power, convinced that the world owed them whatever they wanted to take. I need to think about it, Marcus said finally. Jake's grip tightened on his shoulder. Wrong answer. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Tommy stepped forward, his hand reaching for Marcus's backpack. Derek moved to block any escape route. Jake's fingers dug deeper into Marcus's shoulder, hard enough to leave bruises. And Marcus made his choice. His right hand came up in a textbook disarm, breaking Jake's grip and simultaneously striking the pressure point just below his elbow. Jake's arm went numb instantly, his face registering shock and confusion. Before he could react, Marcus had pivoted, using Jake's own momentum to send him stumbling backward into Derek. Tommy, caught off guard by the sudden reversal, lunged forward with all the grace of an angry bull. Marcus sidestepped easily, grabbing Tommy's extended arm and using a basic judo throw to send him sprawling across the asphalt. The big boy hit the ground hard, his breath leaving him in a whoosh. Derek, tangled up with Jake, was trying to regain his footing when Marcus's foot swept his legs out from under him. He went down in a heap, his head striking the pavement with a sound that made several spectators wince. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds. Marcus stood in the center of the circle, breathing hard but steady. His backpack was still on his shoulder, his notebook still in Derek's unconscious grip. Around him, the parking lot had gone completely silent. Jake was on his hands and knees, shaking his head to clear it. Tommy was curled up on his side, trying to get air back into his lungs. Derek wasn't moving at all. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Did you see that? Marcus looked down at Jake, who was finally managing to focus his eyes. I thought about it, Marcus said quietly. The answer is no. Jake's face was a mask of rage and humiliation. You little freak. You think this is over? You think you can just— It's over, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying a tone that made Jake's mouth snap shut. It's over because I'm done being your victim. It's over because every single person here just watched you get dropped by the kid you've been tormenting for 3 weeks. And it's over because if you ever come near me again, I'll make sure. So the whole school knows exactly how pathetic you really are. Marcus reached down and pulled his notebook from Derek's limp fingers. The boy was breathing but clearly unconscious, a growing knot on his forehead testament to his impact with the asphalt. He needs to see the nurse, Marcus said to no one in particular. Probably has a concussion. Holy shit, Tommy wheezed, finally managing to sit up. What the hell are you? Marcus looked at him for a long moment. I'm someone who just wanted to eat lunch in peace. He turned and walked away, leaving the 3 boys in various states of consciousness behind him. The circle of spectators parted like water, their faces showing a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. As he reached his father's old pickup truck, Marcus heard his name being called. He turned to see Sarah Chen jogging toward him, her face flushed with excitement. Marcus, that was incredible. Where did you learn to fight like that? Sarah was one of the few students who'd been genuinely kind to him since his arrival. She sat 2 seats behind him in calculus and had lent him a pencil on his first day when he'd forgotten his supplies. My dad's military, Marcus said simply. You pick things up. Pick things up? Sarah laughed. You just took down 3 guys. Without breaking a sweat. That's not picking things up, that's being a badass. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. They're not hurt bad. Derek might have a headache for a while, but he'll be fine. Good, Sarah said firmly. Maybe now they'll think twice before picking on someone. Marcus climbed into his truck, aware that half the school was still watching him. I just want to go home. Will you sit with me at lunch tomorrow? Sarah asked. I mean, if you want to. I usually eat with a few friends from the drama club. We're not the cool kids, but we're not assholes either. Marcus considered this. The offer of friendship, of belonging, was tempting, but he'd learned to be cautious about getting too close to people. Military families move too often for deep connections. Sure, he said anyway. I'd like that. Sarah's smile was bright enough to power the entire school. Great, I'll see you tomorrow. As Marcus drove home, he replayed the confrontation in his mind. He'd crossed a line today, revealed capabilities that he'd worked hard to keep hidden. His father had taught him that violence was a tool, not a solution, and that every time you drew that tool, you changed the equation forever. But as he pulled into the driveway of the small rental house he shared with his father, Marcus realized he didn't regret his choice. For the first time since arriving at Westfield High, he felt like he could breathe freely. The next morning, word of the parking lot incident had spread through the school like wildfire. Marcus arrived to find his locker surrounded by curious students, all pretending to be busy with their own business while stealing glances at him. Is it true you know karate? Asked Jennifer Walsh, a sophomore who'd never spoken to him before. Something like that, Marcus replied, opening his locker and pulling out his books. My cousin said you put Derek Walsh in the hospital, said another student whose name Marcus didn't know. He's fine, Marcus said. Mild concussion. He'll be back in a few days. Are you going to get in trouble? Jennifer asked. Marcus shrugged. Probably. He wasn't wrong. Principal Williams called him into the office during second period, his face a mask of administrative concern and barely concealed irritation. Marcus, I understand there was an incident yesterday in the parking lot. Yes, sir. Would you like to tell me your version of what happened? Marcus had prepared for this question. Jake Morrison, Tommy Brennan, and Derek Walsh approached me as I was leaving school. They demanded that I do their homework for them. When I refused, they became physical. I defended myself. Principal Williams leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with tired eyes. 3 students say you attacked them unprovoked. There were dozens of witnesses, Marcus replied calmly. I'm sure they'll confirm that Jake grabbed me first. Even so, Marcus, violence is never the answer. We have policies about fighting on school grounds. I understand that, sir, but I also understand that I have the right to defend myself when threatened. Principal Williams sighed. The Walsh family is considering pressing charges. Derek spent the night in the hospital for observation. Marcus felt his stomach drop, but he kept his expression neutral. That's their choice, sir. But if they do, I'll be happy to explain to the police how 3 students cornered me in the parking lot and demanded money. The threat was subtle but clear. Principal Williams had allowed the bullying to continue for weeks without intervention. Now that it had escalated to violence, he'd have to explain to parents, school board members, and possibly law enforcement why he'd done nothing to protect a student who was clearly being targeted. I'm suspending you for 3 days, Principal Williams said finally. 13 Saitian Manu. Consider yourself lucky it's not worse. Marcus nodded. Thank you, sir. And Marcus, if anything like this happens again, you'll be expelled. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. As Marcus walked out of the office, he saw Jake Morrison sitting in the waiting area, his left arm in a sling. Their eyes met for a moment, and Marcus saw something that hadn't been there before. Fear. The 3-day suspension turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Marcus spent the time catching up on homework, helping his father with household repairs, and thinking about his future at Westfield High. When he returned the following Monday, he found a dramatically changed social landscape. Jake Morrison's arm was still in a sling, and he walked the hallways with a noticeable limp. Tommy Brennan had transferred to the vocational school across town, citing family reasons. Derek Walsh was back in classes but sported a spectacular black eye and a bandage on his forehead. More importantly, none of them made eye contact with Marcus. You're like a celebrity, Sarah said as they sat together in the cafeteria, joined by her friends from the drama club. Half the school thinks you're some kind of ninja, and the other half thinks you're secretly in the CIA. I'm just a guy who got tired of being pushed around, Marcus replied, but he was smiling. Well, whatever you are, you've changed everything, said David Kim, the president of the drama club. Jake Morrison hasn't said a word to anyone in 3 days. It's like he's forgotten how to be an asshole. People change, Marcus said diplomatically. Not Jake, Sarah said firmly. He's the same person he's always been. He's just scared now. Scared that the wrong person might see him for what he really is. Marcus looked around the cafeteria, noting the subtle changes in dynamics. Students who'd once scurried away from Jake's table now walked past with their heads up. The atmosphere was different, less oppressive. It was as if the entire school had been holding its breath, and Marcus's actions in the parking lot had given everyone permission to exhale. But he also noticed the new looks he was getting. Respect, yes, but also wariness. He'd revealed himself to be someone capable of violence, and that revelation changed how people saw him. Some students now approached him with the same caution they'd once reserved for Jake. "I don't want to be the new Jake Morrison," Marcus said quietly. Sarah looked at him seriously. "You won't be. You know the difference between strength and cruelty. Jake never did." 2 weeks later, Marcus was walking to his truck after school when he heard familiar footsteps behind him. He turned to see Jake Morrison approaching, alone, for the first time since the parking lot incident. "Can we talk?" Jake asked, his voice lacking its usual swagger. Marcus studied the other boy's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden aggression. He saw only exhaustion and something that might have been regret. "What do you want to talk about?" Jake looked around the parking lot, noting the students who'd stopped to watch. "Not here. Can we go somewhere private?" Marcus considered this. Every instinct told him to refuse, to walk away, and avoid any possibility of renewed conflict. But something in Jake's posture, in the way he held himself, suggested that this wasn't a setup. "The baseball diamond," Marcus said. "It's empty this time of day." 5 minutes later, they sat on opposite sides of the home team dugout, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the infield. "Derek's parents dropped the charges," Jake said without preamble. "I heard. His dad came to see me, wanted to know exactly what happened that day." Jake picked up a handful of dirt and let it run through his fingers. "I told him the truth." Marcus waited. "I told him that we'd been harassing you for weeks, that we'd cornered you in the parking lot and threatened you, that you only fought back when we got physical." Jake's voice was barely above a whisper. "I told him that everything that happened was our fault." "Why?" Jake looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Because it was. Because I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks, and I can't come up with a single good reason for what we did to you." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. The look in Jake's eyes was familiar. He'd seen it in the mirror during his first weeks at Westfield High when he'd felt powerless and alone. "I used to get picked on," Jake said suddenly. "In middle school, there was this kid, Ryan Torres. He was bigger than me, older, meaner, made my life hell for 2 years. What happened? My dad found out. He's a cop, and he went to Ryan's house, had a conversation with Ryan's father. The bullying stopped the next day." Jake's laugh was bitter. "I swore I'd never let anyone make me feel that helpless again. So you decided to make other people feel that way instead. Yeah, pretty fucked up, right?" Jake shook his head. "The thing is, I convinced myself that I was different, that I wasn't like Ryan, that I had good reasons for what I did." "What reasons?" "Control, respect, power, all the things I thought. I needed to feel safe." Jake stood up and walked to the pitcher's mound, kicking at the dirt. "But you know what I realized? I never felt safe, not really. I just felt afraid all the time, afraid that someone would see through me, would figure out that I was just a scared kid pretending to be tough." Marcus joined him on the mound. "And now I'm still scared, but at least I know why." Jake turned to face Marcus directly. "I'm sorry for everything, for the harassment, the threats, the humiliation. You didn't deserve any of it." The apology hung between them like a bridge, waiting to be crossed. Marcus felt the weight of his father's teachings, the importance of mercy alongside strength. "I accept your apology," Marcus said finally, "but that doesn't mean we're friends." "I know. I wouldn't want to be friends with me either," Jake started, walking back toward the school. "I just wanted you to know that some of us are capable of learning, even when it takes getting our asses kicked to teach us." As Jake walked away, Marcus remained on the pitcher's mound, watching the sun set over Westfield High. He thought about the past month, about the person he'd been when he arrived, and the person he was becoming. The violence in the parking lot had been necessary, but it was only the beginning. Real change, lasting change, required something more difficult than physical strength. It required the courage to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to grow beyond the person you'd been. Marcus Holloway had learned to fight from some of the best warriors in the world, but standing alone on that baseball diamond, He realized that sometimes the greatest victory was knowing when not to fight at all. The rest of his time at Westfield High passed without major incident. He maintained his friendship with Sarah and her drama club friends, joined the school's boxing club, and even tutored younger students in chemistry and math. Jake Morrison nodded when they passed in the hallways, but otherwise left him alone. Tommy Brennan never returned from the vocational school. Derek Walsh graduated early and moved to another state. On the day of graduation, Marcus stood with his classmates, looking out at the crowd of families and friends. His father sat in the third row, proud and beaming in his dress uniform. Next to him sat Mrs. Kowalski, the librarian who'd given Marcus a safe place to eat lunch during those first difficult weeks. As the principal called his name, Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma. The applause was warm and genuine, a far cry from the whispers and stares that had followed him during his first month at Westfield High. But what Marcus remembered most about that day wasn't the ceremony or the celebration afterward. It was the moment just before the processional began when Jake Morrison approached him in the hallway. "Congratulations," Jake said, extending his hand. Marcus shook it. "You too. I'm going to community college in the fall, planning to study social work." Marcus raised an eyebrows. "Social work?" Jake shrugged, almost embarrassed. "Figure maybe I can help kids who are going through what I went through, what you went through. Maybe break the cycle, you know." "That's a good plan," Marcus said, and meant it. "What about you? College? Military? Academy? Following in my dad's footsteps?" Jake nodded. "That makes sense. You've got the discipline for it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two young men who'd found their way to mutual respect through conflict and growth. "Marcus," Jake said, as they prepared to join their classmates. "Yeah? Thanks for not destroying me completely that day. You could have, I know you could have." Marcus considered this. "Destroying you wouldn't have helped anyone, especially not me. Still, thanks."